Welcome to the Contracting Officer Podcast. It's not just for contracting officers. If you're anywhere in the government acquisition world, this podcast is for you. Today, Kevin is talking targeting and business development with special guest William Randolph. And this episode is brought to you, as always, by Skyway Acquisition. Check out Skyway ACQ for more. All right, let's get this one started.
Okay, this time I want to welcome William Randolph to the Contracting Officer Podcast. I love the whiteboard with William sessions that you do on LinkedIn and actually on Facebook as well. You've got a really cool background. So as a way of getting started, tell us about yourself and how you got here.
Well, thanks, Kevin. I really appreciate the opportunity to be a part of our podcast. I am a 1102 contracting officer by training. I spent 26 years in the federal space. First few years in Navy, second few, about 10 years in Navy, 5 years in Marine Corps, and then the last 8 or 9 years of my career in various DHS assignments.
Wow.
Department of Homeland Security.
There it is. We're dropping acronyms already. Okay, that's awesome. And I love that you've got the former CO moniker just like we do. So I've enjoyed some of our conversations. So let's get one into the podcast here.
Okay.
So of the myriad of stuff we could talk about, let's start with a really cool strategy that you use for targeting. Targeting is one of my favorite topics. It's one of the most interesting things about business because you never master it. You're never done, right? You keep testing and refining, and sometimes we're right with our targeting, sometimes we're wrong. But either way, we learn that we're actively targeting to get better as businesses on who we actually go after. So your process for targeting, which is like targeting 2.0, is you talk about hunting, fishing, and farming. So that's the William concept that we're going to dig into. I've been a student of sales for years. I just like business to business sales and the complex sale. So the hunting and farming I'd heard of. I mean, hunters go after new business and farmers grow their relationships with the customers they have. But this fishing part is really cool. Before we dig into that, though, tell me how you came up with this concept, like how it's become like a foundational element for you.
Sure. Well, I started my business in 2019, and I knew I had to go fast. My desire was to go fast. So I was looking for a business development model that matched my personality. I don't consider myself being a salesy type individual. So therefore, I was looking for a model that allowed me to do multiple things at multiple times. The hunting, fishing, and farming model is simply a country boy from Virginia's way of describing a strategy that allows you to do multiple things, multiple business development and growth activities at the same time and to deliver on that ROI.
So tell me more about how this hunting, fishing, farming model, like how the method really lays out.
Sure. It is really a strategy for small, emerging, or at least in a growth phase of government contractors to understand and to interact with the market. The hunting model is simply it being opportunistic. The fishing model is being focused and deliberate in a one-to-many philosophy, a one-to-many strategy. And farming is really all about the relationships. How do you identify, plant, grow relationships, tend to them, and then they'll be harvested at some point in the future.
And what's cool is that they're so different, but they all lead to the same result. That sales is a lagging indicator. Like getting new customers is a result of something.
Absolutely.
And the cool thing about your model is the simplicity of hunting, fishing, farming is the activities that the result of which will be getting actual new customers. Give me some of the strategies that you actually use for each of the hunting, fishing, farming models.
So just as the analogy suggests, hunting is really about identifying targets. Okay, so something comes across your field of vision, and if it looks like something that you're interested in engaging on, doing the work to target and then shoot at that opportunity. That often looks like something coming across on a beta.sam saying, hey, this is a sources sought or an RFI or pre-solicitation notice that this requirement has hit the street. Now, the challenge with that is there is a high degree of luck associated with that activity because you're a little downstream when if you're first seeing something on beta.sam, it's a little late in the game. Somebody else has likely been looking at that, watching it, doing capture, may even been shaping it for weeks, if not months, before you get an opportunity. But if it's something in your wheelhouse, I just suggest that you don't miss an opportunity to shoot on it for no other reason than it gives you an opportunity to build the business development and bid and proposal muscles to respond to something in a timely fashion. Fishing is truly a one-to-many model. Okay, so it's how many times can you tell your story, tell your value proposition, or share your value proposition and why you have expertise in the space and why someone would want to do business with you in a one-to-many scenario. This could be podcasts, this could be blog posts, there could be posts on LinkedIn, this could be speaking engagements or webinars, whatever method allows you to have a one-to-many approach to getting in front of people, getting engaged with them, and demonstrating your value. Farming is really the culminating activity after your hunting and fishing. You will build relationships in your hunting and fishing, or you will create relationships. That farming activity is keeping those relationships warm and cultivated, okay? Because at some point in the future, if those relationships are cultivated and you are mining and tending to those relationships will deliver an ROI back to you because then you have other people hunting and fishing for you.
So the hunting is more reactionary, but you still need it. The fishing is right at the edge of opportunity, and then the farming is way upstream.
You got it.
So it's really kind of the timeline. So the hunting, fishing, farming is the timeline is inverse to that.
Yes.
That's what I love the simplicity of this when we first talked about it, is it helps people understand that you can't just hunt or you're only living on luck, right? You can't just fish or you're not going to have enough exposure and understanding actually how to bid and win work. And you can't just farm or it just takes too long.
Yes.
You got to have all three.
Yeah. You'll have tons of friends, but you'll never get any work.
Exactly. Yeah. That's funny and frustrating. Okay. So what makes this so effective? What really makes it work?
So I think it is active. It's active on multiple levels. Here's what I believe. The if you build it, they will come model only works in the movies.
Yeah.
Okay. So you have to let people know, one, you exist as a company. Two, you have a value proposition. And three, you're interested in delivering it in some fashion to the marketplace. These three strategies allow you to do three levels of activity. Reactionary, it's like opportunistic and reactionary. It's another level that's very methodical and thoughtful. And then a third that is long range, that is really about the honing and fostering the relationships and realizing that it's often a give, and you don't know when the return is coming, but that you give to the relationship, you build a relationship, and you demonstrate value in the relationship, and the relationship will then provide you an ROI in the business.
And it's interesting that the farming element of the three has the most of a faith element to it. It's like you just have to have faith these relationships are going to work out.
Absolutely.
And it takes a long time. But again, that's why you get the timeline. You have to have a timeline with each one of them.
Kevin, it absolutely does. In the end, and I'm sure you've heard this multiple times, and I've heard it multiple times, and I didn't really understand it, that people do business with people they like, know, and trust. Okay. Yep. And that, and even in the optimum meritocracy that is federal procurement, okay, that it's an effective turn of the acquisition crank, that no matter what goes in, if we have a good turn, what comes out is good. That machinery is still operated by humans. Yeah. And as a result of that, humans do business with people they like, know, and trust.
Yeah, it's the 80-20 rule. We talk about, multiple episodes. If it's 80% process, 20% relationship, some things are 20% process and 80% relationship, but there's always a balance.
Yes.
And understanding what that balance is. And it's been interesting to me just from talking to, I have an episode coming up hopefully in a few months, with somebody who worked in a very small agency where they only used FAR Part 13. And for him, it's like 80% relationship. But there's still a process, but it's so much relationship. And then those of us that even bought major systems, you still had that relationship piece. It's like you had to be able to trust these people could actually deliver. So these concepts of hunting, fishing, farming, they apply everywhere. I love the simplicity of it, but also the broad effectiveness of it. I'm gonna talk time zones. We can't have a podcast episode without digging in the acquisition and execution time zones. And if you're new to the podcast, episode number 3 is where we cover the acquisition time zones, and episode number 84 is where we cover the execution time zones. If you're not familiar with this, so in the acquisition time zones, when we're talking about the fishing and farming and hunting, it's going to be mostly apparent in the requirement zones in different ratios during that window, but they're going to be in the requirement zone because the government needs to understand what can be done, right? Likewise, in the market research zone, who can do it? That's where the fishing and the relationships come up, because you got to be able to say, the government needs to be able to say, yes, they can do this. And I'm also going to touch on the execution time zones is during the performance zone. During the performance zone is where you're doing the work. And that's where the farming really kicks in, because now you've got past performance, you've got evidence you can actually do this. You've built relationships, not only with government customers, but also potentially with teammates. They now know you can do this. But the time zones really help people understand when this is important. And to your point, it's very much a balance of things that are way upstream as well as things that are right in front of you.
Yes. Yeah. I just truly believe we have to tackle them all. We have to be working in all zones. I really like your language around the requirements zone from a standpoint of this is where your ability to become top of mind with your government buyers and users, that's where that starts paying dividends, because then they can advocate for you. Imagine when acquisition strategy, people are around the table or on a Zoom and they're thinking about what contract vehicle to use for the requirement. If you have become top of mind and you are not, and they know of you, do you think they would select a contract vehicle that you couldn't play on?
Exactly. Okay. They're going to figure out which contract vehicle you're on.
Exactly. Exactly. That's the ROI. Now you do have to go as an individual government contractor. You have to go and win the work. Okay. So no one's giving anything away, but you win when you can have your government buyers and users advocate for you and put you in positions where you can effectively compete.
Yeah, we talk a lot about all contracts are competed in some way. It's just that sometimes the competition is happening long before or instead of an RFP.
You got it.
And that's happening from the combination of hunting, fishing, farming. When do you see this being the most effective from the industry, from the seller, the small business's perspective?
I think it's most effective all the time. Okay. And again, we talk about layers. So there's one layer that's extremely opportunistic. You know, something comes across your path and you shoot on it, and hopefully you have the capability and the muscle memory and all the activity and the capacity to take it down. But it's extremely opportunistic. High degrees of luck in it, but that happens. That opportunity happens at times. The second is deliberate from a standpoint of one to many. Those conversations, as a small business, we don't have the luxury of doing one-to-one. There's not enough hours in the day to have one-to-one hour conversations with, if you have 24 people, when are you going to sleep? If you on a day, you want to talk to 24 people hour to hour. But imagine if you took that 1 hour and talked from 1 to 24 people. You could talk to 24 people at one time. That's an ROI on your time that far exceeds the ability to do one-on-one conversation. So the ability to demonstrate value is a way for you to say, from one to many, we're going to be deliberate, intentional, and deliberate in our communications. And from being in a farming perspective, and being most effective, that's a continual activity. To your point, someone may land something 8 years later from a seed that was planted 8 years ago. Okay, it just happens that way. So if you disregard the planting of relationship seeds and tending those crops, you're missing out on, my opinion, a third of the layer that will eventually turn into ROI for your business down the road.
Well, and what's really cool about the farming element is the compounding piece of it. Is that
yes.
Again, 10 years into business, I'm starting to really feel that compounding impact of 10 years of farming. It's just amazing how that works.
And Kevin, when you think about it, the compounding effect of farming, it's also a compounding effect of all three layers. Everything that you hunt on, whether you're successful in taking it down or not, becomes an opportunity for you to fish with them. Okay.
Yeah.
And every time you have an opportunity to fish, you're actually creating relationships. The result of the fishing is relationships. Okay. And then you take the relationships and come down to farm and cultivate them. And then that's where the ROI, if the ROI doesn't show up in level 1 or level 2, at some point it will show up in level 3.
But it basically works like a flywheel, because the farming then creates better opportunities that you then go hunt.
You got it. You said it earlier about building past performance. And once you're able to build past performance, you're in the acquisition zone. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. As soon as you have past performance, now you get to play a different game. While I still think hunting, fishing, and farming are important, the more past performance you have, the better hunter you become.
Exactly. Yeah, because you know what to shoot at.
Yes. Yes, exactly.
You know when hunting season is even open, for that matter.
Exactly.
We wouldn't be true to our podcast listeners if we didn't consider the portion of them who are government folks. So we'll do our "Why Does Government Care" segment on this, right? And so I get we're talking about business development and creating opportunities. And so as a contracting officer, I guess I really didn't care per se, because I didn't understand that these elements were there, right? I didn't think about whether someone was hunting, fishing, or farming. But in retrospect, I clearly can see the difference, and I can see the difference in the value. And so for example, hunters were business development folks who would be walking around my agency trying to build relationships with us. And I actively avoided them as a contracting officer. Is that in reality, if I don't have, and we talk about this a lot on the podcast, contracting officer doesn't have the requirement, contracting officer doesn't have the money. Contracting officer stitches together the person who can deliver with the person who needs it, right? So until there's a need and money to pay for it, having a conversation with a BD person is not very effective. So is that your experience?
Kevin, my same experience. I distinctly remember there were times when I was literally shields up from a standpoint of communications. It's that I am the keeper of the process, okay? And that I would do nothing. I would do nothing that would interject risk into the effective turn of the process. Okay, so therefore, if it was an errant communication, if it was a happy hour, it's like, nope, I don't want to be bothered. Okay, I don't want to do any of that stuff, because it was always a fear that those activities or those communication moments could somehow come back and interject risk into your acquisition.
Yeah, well said. I remember skipping many a happy hour for that reason. That's funny. And the shields up is just a great metaphor for it. So then people who are fishing, and we're talking about marketing, we're talking about product samples, we're talking about information about it, like a lot of market research that we talked about during the market research zone. And so as a contracting officer, there are a couple scenarios where I would get a product that I didn't think of it as one to many, but that's what they were doing. They're bringing this product to my agency. And as a contracting officer on this program, we had a bunch of evaluators and users that we get a product. And if they got the product for free, there's a document we had to go back and forth, and we told them, we're probably going to destroy this thing. You're not going to get it back. You're not getting paid for this, all that kind of stuff. That was my role. But that was somebody who had targeted, they had an overall, I guess, understanding is the best way to say it, of what the customer needed. And I became the conduit to take that line of the bait, basically, and come up with the process. Like you said, we own the process to be able to hand it to the users and let them do whatever they want with it, and realize there's no risk of, in this case, it did actually get destroyed.
Absolutely. And that's why I think, but that's why I think the government should care. Okay, from a standpoint of one to many, because what this does is the more companies you have that are deploying this one to many strategy, it's just actually building your body of market intelligence. Whether on a program or in your space or for your agency or department, the more information you have, the better questions you can ask. Therefore, you get better answers. Okay, so therefore, the more information you have is the greater and the more depth of your market intelligence that allows you to ask better questions when it's market research time. Then the solutions come back informed by these levels of knowledge, of information that is just shared, in a one-to-many environment, in a fishing environment. And here's the challenge, and I don't want to dive too deep here, but we often get those better questions late in the process, and it forces us to go back upstream.
Yep.
Imagine if we could have got those questions asked early and had answers for them, we could have baked them in, and then our solutions would be available. That considers those questions. It's often we get the questions at the proposal evaluation time. It's like, crap, I didn't think about that. Then we got to go back. It's at the wrong time. So the earlier we can ask good questions, the better.
No, it's so funny. I'm not the only one that's had that experience. That's so good. Okay, so again, putting on my contracting officer hat, and farmers were folks who are working from the inside out. Like, this is the incumbent working to build more relationships, making sure that they're delivering well, they're compounding their past performance. And then they even stayed in contact with me after they moved off of the particular program, or in some cases, when we competed a contract that they didn't actually win, but they were still with us for other projects, they would follow up with me every 3 months or so. And they're focused on building off of their delivery, to ending the relationship.
Yeah, it's really an extension of any hunting and fishing activities, that once you land some work, there's still a relationship that needs to be built. There is performance to be done, and there are relationships to be built. If you do the performance without the relationships, that won't last long. If you do the relationships without the performance, that won't last long.
Definitely won't last long.
Right. It is both. So that's why, in my opinion, that's why the government should care about that activity, is that you're literally building trusted agents that you can have compelling conversations with. And those compelling conversations then start taking you down the strategy of asking better questions and getting better answers.
Yeah, the things I wish I knew as a contracting officer.
Yeah.
So let's go back to the industry side. So, why does industry care about this? Well, obviously to generate new opportunities and build on the ones that they have. But like you said, they need all three, right? So talk me through, like, how do you do it? How does Think Acquisition do all three of these?
It is truly a strategic and tactical use of the same clock. Okay, when I think about it, like, I have the same 24 hours. How much of these three things can I do in one day? So hunting looks like research on beta, having a crawler on beta.sam.gov that's identifying RFI, source of salt, pre-solicitation notices that I can go participate in and that I can shoot on. It's opportunistic, but that is a body of activity that needs to occur. That if I ignore that, the short-term activity, the short-term ROIs, I lose out on those short-term ROIs. So it's simply looking or having things pushed to me, and people use GovWin or Deltec or whatever the other various tools are that allow them to get short-term looks at opportunities. That's how it looks for me. That's how I deploy hunting. Fishing is my opportunity to get in front of as many people as possible. And I learned this piece when I was at the NCMA World Congress that went 100% virtual earlier in 2020. I had spoke at the World Congress the year before, and I think I probably had about 50 or 60 people in the room. When I did the virtual version of that a year later, I had 678 people in the room. And what I learned was, after the 678 people, I had a slide in the back of my presentation that says, hey, if you're on LinkedIn, connect with me. If you're not on LinkedIn, you should be on LinkedIn, and then connect with me. After the presentation, and it was almost immediate, my phone started blah, 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 and I literally had probably one quarter. It was like 1 in 4 of those 678 people. In the next 2 or 3 days, I had about 150, 160 notifications for people wanting to connect with me. And then a smaller subset of those people was like, I love what you did there. Could you do this for my organization? Could you pick a topic and do this for my organization? And I was sold. I was like, fishing works. This one to many. So after that point, part of my job and part of my responsibility as a business owner is, every week, how can I get in front of 10, 20, 30, 50, 100 people to demonstrate competency in the space, credibility on the subject matter, and my willingness to be a participant in the marketplace? That's what fishing looks like for me. And then what farming looks like is really the result of one of those fishing moments. I spoke at at a business development conference that was in Huntsville. So the team was in Huntsville. It was virtual. And I met a person that was in the training and development space on that call. She reached out, connected on LinkedIn, and we just started sharing some things in our space because we share the training and development space. She does it on a different area, and I'm in the contracts and acquisition acquisition vertical. And we would share some points, something would come up or an article or something, and we would share. And then about 4 months ago, this individual contacted me and said, "Hey, William, I'm on a team and we're solutioning this body of work, pretty large body of work. And there's the seventh category of work that is acquisition support. None of us know what that means, but that's what you do, right?" And I was like, "Yes, by the way, that is what I do." So I was with one phone call, I was invited to the Primes team, okay, met all the subs, met the team, and was invited to go to market with a company that I would have, never seen the opportunity. It was too big on its own for a 4-person company like me to go after, okay? But when someone looks at it and identifies one of 7 pieces of bodies of pieces of work that is right in my swim lane, I get invited to the dance and I get an opportunity to go to the prom with a team, okay? And that all emanated from a free fishing moment, having a conversation and a business development presentation with a group down in Huntsville.
Well, and it's very cool how they create different opportunities. I mean, that's because if you're looking on FBO, you're not going to see those.
No.
If you're only doing NCMA free presentations, you're going to make a lot of connections, but they might not go anywhere. And so you're always balancing all this out. And then the thing I love about that networking story is that when they send you the link and say, "Hey, we've been shaping this, by the way, here's the RFI," you know how to manage all that. Well, you wouldn't have learned how to manage all that if you hadn't been doing the hunting. So you got to do all three. So.
Yes, and it's warm. That's the thing about it. It's warm. This isn't a cold call. When someone calls you like that, it's not only warm, it's piping hot. They're just waiting for you to put your name on the team in agreement. The thing about the fishing is that on any given fishing moment, the person may not have pain. Okay, they just may be enjoying your content. But there's going to be a day they wake up with a headache, a backache, a toothache, and it's like, "Ooh, I know this guy that sells Tylenol." Exactly. So that's when the connection's made. So it might take 12 months or 50 podcasts or 4 years or 12 Christmas cards, whatever that model looks like, that you're cultivating those relationships. When the pain shows up, all you want to make sure that they know is that you sell Tylenol.
Well, and the beauty of this is that you on top of all of this, you still have to target. You mentioned your vertical is government acquisition, and I guess one of your verticals is also leadership within that.
Yes.
So you have this niche, and it's very important, just like our niche. It's like we don't go outside of the lanes of government contracting. In fact, we stay at the ground level. That's kind of our strategy, is our podcast content. We're going over specific examples of how to do this. When we take this idea of hunting, fishing, farming, it's within the bubble of what are you really good at? What is the targeted strategy? And that's really why it works so well. Because if you and I decided we wanted to start selling cars tomorrow, we wouldn't be nearly as good at it.
It would be tough. It'll be tough.
We could go on for hours here. So let's wrap this up with, how do people get a hold of you? And what is, describe your perfect vertical of when somebody needs X, they should call William.
So thank you. So I have planted my social media flag, if you will, on LinkedIn. So if you go to LinkedIn, William Randolph, you can find me there. I also have a YouTube channel, which is William's Whiteboard. All the posts start on LinkedIn, but then they find their way to YouTube. My verticals, and I probably have two. On the government contracting side, so government federal facing, it is acquisition, training, development, and contracts, program management, and leadership. So I do training, all virtual now in that vertical to the federal government. My industry-facing side is small business GovCon support in the areas of marketing, branding, strategy, and segmentation. So what I mean by segmentation is taking the data and looking at the data and saying, based on what markets you want to be in, what NAICS codes you sell in, or you want to offer in. Let's go look at the universe of government contracts. Let's put the shotgun away. Let's go get data. Let's identify targets and give you a rifle. Okay, so that's what we're focused on in that space. And we want to give people a clear way of determining value that is focused on the government contracting side.
Well, and one of the things I love about our relationship is that you are just before us. Like the customers we focus on are the ones that they've gotten their first contract. They're getting an email from the contracting officer and they're like, what the heck do I do with this?
Right.
They're trying to build that relationship for the next one. They're trying to write a bigger proposal, like the growth strategy that comes after they've gotten help from you. So you and I it's kind of cool that we're very complementary. So
yeah, I like that. I like that as well. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So until next time, this is awesome. I will see you around, William.
Take care. Thank you so much, Kevin.
That's it for today's episode of the Contracting Officer Podcast. Thanks for joining us. As Kevin described, when you're ready to build your relationship with Skyway's team of former contracting officers for training and custom consulting support, go to skywayacq.com or give us a call at 877-884-5280. We'll see you next week.